Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, esteemed guests, colleagues, and productivity fans. I'm Lee Dong-jin, the Program Officer in APO Secretariat, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining Productivity Talk, organized by the Asian Productivity Organization. Today, we will explore a topic of why SMEs should be interested in their ESG reporting, even though it is not a mandatory, and the necessity to take action on implementing sound sustainability today, and how it can enhance productivity. Global awareness of climate change and sustainability has grown exponentially over the past decade, making terms like corporate responsibility, carbon footprint, and transparency kind of the new buzzword of our time. The drive toward a more sustainable future has propelled ESG consideration, or environmental, social, and governance in its full form, to a forefront of a board meeting in companies worldwide, firmly establishing their status as a paramount concern in the modern business world. Cost saving, increased market share, and stakeholder expectations are just some of the key drivers behind the shift toward sustainability. Simultaneously, the government at the local and national levels are tightening environmental, fiscal, and corporate registration and regulations, requiring companies to disclose a significant amount of the data through ESG reporting. This means companies will need robust, auditable ESG data. ESG data reporting is often one of the primary challenges for companies across all industries, and one that can be solved easily by following international standards and best practices. Today's Talk will delve into intricacies of ESG reporting and how SMEs incorporate ESG into their corporate strategies. Thank you for joining Talk again. Let us get started on this journey toward ESG and sustainability for SMEs. Joining us in Talk today is Ms. Marisa Agrasat. Marisa Agrasat is the managing partner of the Inceptory in Singapore and seasoned management consultant with over 18 years of experience, specializing in sustainability and ESG integration. She leverages evidence-based research and innovative thinking to drive projects that balance value creation and sustainable impact. Her expertise spans strategic planning, client relationship management, and stakeholder engagement, with a focus on aligning business strategies with ESG principles. Ms. Marisa's work emphasizes holistic multidisciplinary collaboration, bridging innovation, sustainability, and leadership in diverse sectors. Warm welcome to you, Ms. Marisa. Thanks so much for your valuable time for Talk. How are you today, Ms. Marisa?
I'm good, thank you, Dong-jin. Thank you for the invitation here, and I'm really pleased to be talking about such an important topic for this area.
All right, I look forward to your insight today about ESG and sustainability for SMEs. So now let me invite Ms. Marisa Agrasat to give her Talk. So if you are ready, please, you may start your sharing.
Great. Thank you, Dong-jin. Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, hopefully in Asia as well as globally. Just to get started on this talk. So why is this such an important topic for this region? And I think this is something that we've been seeing increasing interest around for many years, but we haven't seen as much action as we'd like. So today I'd like to share why this is important for SMEs and how you can really get started on this, even if it's not necessarily something that you've got a mandate to do, or if it's something that has been mandated by the government yet. So just to share a little bit about myself, I'm based here in Singapore, but work in the region. And I've been here in the region for about 20 years now. My background is actually in value creation and problem solving. So really around design and innovation and creating value for organizations. And I think over the years, I felt that there was more we could be doing and opportunities that we could be seizing to help organizations create value, not just for themselves, but for broader society. So I've worked with a variety of organizations, such as kind of corporations, governments. I have my own SME and worked with SMEs, as well as worked with nonprofits as well. So the kind of experience spans organizations of all different sizes. And whilst there are some different challenges they have, there are also some universal challenges that they have. I came into kind of the sustainability and ESG space around the time of the global financial crisis, back in 2009 or so. And I came in through kind of permaculture and self-sufficiency, where I learned about systems thinking and realized that a lot of our thinking wasn't as holistic as it could be, and we're missing a lot of information and ways of thinking around our work. And so my own journey started with having a business that was looking at including kind of circularity, and it was a sustainability-led business, which looked at kind of ways that we could on a daily basis make conscious decisions about our contribution to food, agriculture, and that really pushed me to think harder about how businesses integrate these kinds of considerations into their own business and their own decision making as well. I'm a consultant, I'm a facilitator and an educator, and I'm also a board director apprentice. So I kind of see that I span many different perspectives, I think, and I try to incorporate that into my work as well. So why am I here talking about kind of sustainability kind of reporting as well as kind of disclosures and things like that for SMEs? Well, historically, I think my work focused on the opportunities that generally business had in creating value around what they did. And what that meant was that people are often focused on the kind of really exciting ideas and products and services that they could make. And throughout the last, I suppose, more like 5 to 7 years in the region at least, there's been increasingly talk about reporting, sustainability reporting. And so previously my focus was on this kind of carrot of creating value for businesses and society through the work I do. But what we're seeing is that a lot of people now are actually talking about sustainability as risk. And that's something we'll focus on in the talk today. But if you think about it in terms of risk, you feel like you're kind of looking at mitigating or preventing risk. And for some people, the risk is a bigger driver than the opportunity. And for some people, the opportunity and value creation and the carrot is more of a driver for that. And what we like to do is think about both sides of that, because on one hand, there is opportunity, but on the other hand, there's a way to see risk as the opportunity in itself. And so that's the carrot and stick that many of us like to kind of swing between when we're looking at the ways that we can make a change in our business or in our reporting. So I suppose what we know is that many of you have heard many different terms around sustainability and ESG, and you'll have heard various terms, you know, within business environment, in the newspapers, in the news, in regulation. And it means many different things to many different people. And what we're seeing is that people are interchangeably using many terms to communicate broadly some similar ideas, but when you look deeper into them, they have a lot of difference in them. And so how people choose to focus their efforts into that is also important when you're looking at the different actions that can be taken. So they all look at broadly making a difference to the social and environmental impact of a business and society and the environment. But what we'll see is that different people will approach it from a slightly different angle. And so it's really good to see the different interpretations and to become more critical of how you interpret what you're being told and what you're being asked to do as well. And that's something that we would encourage everyone to do, whether or not you think it's an opportunity or a risk, but to really understand more of the broader ideas underlying these different terms, because you're basically trying to create either positive social, environmental, and business impact, or you're trying to avoid the risk of negative impacts on the environment, society, and your business together. So just to briefly sort of outline what's the slight difference between the two terms. And in one way, it's important, and in another way, it's also not as important as we might think. So just to say that what I'm saying is highly debatable between a lot of people, and everyone has a different idea of what sustainability and the terms underneath there mean. And I'm trying to kind of make this an accessible way for SMEs to understand and get started on this. So I'll use some kind of broad simplifications, but also try not to put things into definitive boxes, because I think it's important that people feel that they're able to do something within the scope of their work. So if we think about sustainability as a broad term, that often sits as an overarching kind of idea. And it's something more of a holistic concept that's focused on the long-term ecological and societal well-being of the planet. And that includes, you know, humans and animals, and biodiversity, and our planetary health. And that's something that's quite broad, and sometimes people will define that as their kind of business strategy. Now, if we take the term ESG, for example, as a kind of subset of that, or a framework for thinking about how we approach sustainability at a broader level, we can see that it's maybe more specific, often used within the context of a framework to evaluate performance of a company, and sort of looking at the risk element of environmental, social, and governance. So that environmental is E, social is S, and G is the governance. And so these are broadly defined in this way, but often people will use them interchangeably, which is okay to generally say you're moving in a certain direction. But when it comes to being specific about your business initiatives, this is where you might want to make some differentiation. And ESG generally could be said to have originated from more of the kind of finance industry, where they're looking at specific ways and factors to kind of measure or outline certain performance as well. So you could say that ESG can be a little bit more limited and selective as well, and sustainability could be seen as slightly more conceptual or a strategic direction of an organization. So broadly, here are a couple of lists of slight differences that you might want to consider. And again, these are not mutually exclusive nor collectively exhaustive, but I just want to kind of outline. So as I said, sustainability is slightly broader, more of a kind of balance of resource management and long-term ecological balance. It encompasses environmental, economic, and social factors. And it kind of addresses the interconnectedness and interdependence of these three elements really well. And you shouldn't really be talking about sustainability as one of the three. It should really encompass all three dimensions of economy, society, and the environment. Often people say that it focuses on how a company impacts the world. So the business activities of a company and how they impact outside of that organization. Some people will say that it's often defined by, you know, a company doing better for the planet or for the world. So it's not just simply a set of measured indicators, but rather this idea that organizations will be doing more than they do in their daily business operations to create something more for civilization. You could say that it lacks a universally accepted definition, which makes it challenging to set measurable goals. I don't necessarily think that's true, but often people like to kind of set it as a conceptual idea. And it could represent the end goal of creating a balanced, equitable, and enduring ecosystem. So it's like the general health of the planet, society, and economy. And if we look at ESG, maybe it's a bit more defined. So we say it's maybe a specific set of criteria that's used to evaluate a company's environmental, social, and governance. And this is something that, as I said, originated in the finance industry broadly, but something that we've adopted to try and pinpoint specific things about companies and how they perform in their sustainability or in their sustainability pursuit. Often data-driven and investor-focused. So this means that this kind of links somewhat to reporting, whereby we say that there are specific things, qualitative and quantitative data, but metrics that people can look to in terms of seeing improvement or kind of not improvement in a performance. And it provides measurable metrics that influence investment decisions and corporate strategies. So maybe people are using this kind of information to make decisions about how they engage with a company on more of a financial basis or a strategic basis. And maybe kind of investors' decision making there as well. Focuses on how the world impacts a company or investment. So I'll go into materiality later on, but how does what's happening outside impact what the company or how the company performs. It's often based on a set of standards by lawmakers, investors, or reporting organizations. So that's something that can be defined by other people, and people kind of talk about their performance against. It's more of an emphasis on managing risk, reputation, operations, and capital. So rather than a broad betterment for the society, it's actually, well, we're looking at like mitigating or managing those risks more specifically. And it can include governance as a key component, whereas perhaps unlike some sustainability frameworks, it may not include governance, although I think that's less true nowadays. I think governance is now a critical component that's not being excluded anymore. It's probably before people focus more on governance separately, and can be directly tied to financial performance and risk assessment. So again, this is a slightly more metric-based, data-driven approach. And I would liken it, and I'll go into this analogy a bit later, more around specific data or metrics that are measurable and not always comparable, but something that helps people to think about it in that way, whereas sustainability is a little bit broader and less well-defined sometimes, and sometimes more qualitative. So why do we need to act? Now, I won't go too much into this. I think we're all quite aware of the bigger picture, but just to set the context a little bit. So unless you've been under a rock for the last few years, I think what we're seeing is global events, more weather, extreme weather patterns. Year after year, we're seeing these recurring patterns and events, many of them kind of unpredictable and unmanageable, and we're not able to deal with them. And they're kind of resulting in, death, economic loss, destruction, disruption. We're seeing these events, hurricanes, flooding globally. So we've seen it in Europe, in France, in Germany, and even in this last year, we've seen it in the US. So we've had hurricanes and severe flooding due to those events as well. We've seen it more regionally and closer to us here in Thailand, just last month. In Afghanistan, Indonesia, India, we have Taiwan having some extreme weather patterns now due to typhoon season, and even in the Philippines and Vietnam and in China. So it seems like nobody is spared from some of the devastation that's happening across the world. And that's something that we'll keep seeing increasingly as the weather and the climate changes based on human activity. And this is something that's coming more and more commonplace, and eventually, obviously, impacts our economy, our livelihoods, our ability to produce food, have clean water, and all those ongoing and cascading effects that we are all impacted by as our global supply chains are more interconnected and interdependent. So we see our planet, and it seems like something quite distant, as if we're somehow small players on this thing we call Earth. I believe when we see it from this angle, we see the magnitude of the planet and think that we might be safe, or that something will not impact us in the same way. But as we see increasingly through our supply chains, but also as we saw through COVID, that we are all interconnected and interdependent, and there's nothing that happens here in the region that may not impact others around the world, and vice versa. And so we try to connect this macro view with something more day-to-day for ourselves. And that's something that I think we often struggle to do, because we are deep in the process of creating value in business and working on our own, strategy to kind of build our own kind of economy and our workforces as well. And so just to share, there are these existential threats that we face, or one big existential threat that we face. And what we're looking at here is the 9 planetary boundaries. And there's both an immediate threat to us, as we've seen through the weather and changing climate, as well as through kind of the day-to-day impacts that we're feeling, and the longer term experiences that we're probably looking at facing as well. And so the 9 planetary boundaries are 9 critical Earth system processes that have been identified by the Stockholm Resilience Centre. And what they've done is outlined these 9 processes which allow the Earth to operate within a certain safe zone for us as human beings to thrive. And so this has been work that's been developed over the last 20 years or so. And what we're seeing is that actually we have these 9 boundaries, and so far we have transgressed 6 of these boundaries. And these 6 out of 9 boundaries are allowing us, currently we can operate in a safe space, but we're increasingly seeing that as these are being transgressed, we're unsure of what the impacts will be later on as we go beyond these. And so the Earth will perhaps no longer be safe for us. We'll no longer be able to support the activities that we need to stay safe, to grow food, to have fresh water, to have clean air, and to have temperatures that we can survive in without extreme disruption or kind of death across large numbers. And so to try and connect the two things is that our economy sits within society, and our society fits within the environment, and we cannot disconnect from these things. They are intricately linked, and everything that we draw and depend on in our economy is dependent on the earth itself, the natural resources that we draw from it, and a stable operating environment that we all enjoy that allows us to survive and flourish as we have been for many years. And so that's something that is the bigger picture for us to think about. If these boundaries are transgressed, we're not sure what happens. And so this way of looking at it is really to help us to see if we no longer have an environment that can support us, we no longer have a stable, and in some parts of the world, most parts of the world, we have peace and stability. But we're increasingly seeing that many tensions are arising due to geopolitical issues that may be related to resources, to territories, and the ability to stay within the boundaries that we have. And so in that sense, what we try to show people and encourage people to understand is that these need to be understood together. And that is broadly what sustainability and ESG try to do, and why we try to take paths of action towards improving what we do on an individual basis to then be able to, positively impact the collective, because we're all on this planet together. We don't have a second place to go yet. And so as the environment changes, we may see that society changes, and we will then see how that those changes impact our economy as well. And so what we know is that we're seeing more and more of these frequent kind of crises happening. And that's something that we cannot control once they start to kind of interact. And we're not sure if everything or what exactly will happen to those various levels of our planet, our society, and the economy. And so if we look at something that was the term that was coined by the World Economic Forum, by the historian Adam Tooze, who was the person who kind of popularized it recently, what we see is this global polycrisis. It was first coined in the 1970s, and more recently we've heard it become more and more prevalent in the conversation. And it basically looks at, it's experts who are looking at short-term and long-term challenges that we're facing for the planet. And in this report by the World Economic Forum called the Global Risks Report, they outline, this was done they do it annually now, but this was done in 2023, found that the risk of the polycrisis is growing. And this is where kind of a disparate number of crises interact such that the overall impact far exceeds the sum of each part. And as we can see, what that means is that there are different things happening around the world globally that are interconnected and that will and do interact with each other. We saw it in the global financial crisis 15 years ago, and now we're seeing it happening again and again. If we look at aggressions in different parts of the world impacting energy prices, if we see supply chains disrupted due to lack of water in certain parts where these ships need to pass through, it impacts the prices of goods in other countries. And so we're seeing that all these things become something that together form what they call this polycrisis. And it seems that perhaps we experience that on an individual level. But what we actually know is it's a collective experience that many of us are facing. And that's something that we can't really avoid in this global system that we live in. So the cost of living rises through the price of energy rising. And then we have this compounding effect of climate crisis and flooding. And so it's something that it's not a singularly and clearly defined boundary that we have for each of these, but it's a confluence of many things that seem to happen concurrently. And at some point, they seem to converge into the minds of many of us and the experiences of many of us collectively. And so this is something that we see will impact economics, the politics, geopolitics, and the natural environment all coming together at the same time. So it's something that we're looking to try and avoid or mitigate or be better prepared for in the future. We hope it doesn't come to that. In this report that the World Economic Forum produced, they look at kind of a lot of these factors and risks to economies. And so in the next 2 years, you see that there are a number of different kind of risks that we face. And so these have changed. They see that through this analysis that they've done, they think that these will change in the next 2 years, and over the next 10 years, they will change. So number one, we have misinformation and disinformation in the kind of next 2 years. And the second one is kind of extreme weather events, societal polarization, cybersecurity, interstate armed conflict. So those are the first kind of 5. And then what they're seeing that these economic, environmental, geopolitical, societal, technological risks will shift. And so in the next 10 years, most of these, as you can see, relate to many, many forms around kind of environment and planetary risks that we'll face. So extreme weather events, they believe, will be number one. Critical change to Earth systems, which relates to the planetary boundaries that we just showed. Biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse. We're all dependent on a stable ecosystem for our food and survival. And natural resource shortages. So all the materials that we take from the earth will then become somehow short or depleted, or there'll be kind of issues around those distributions. So, and pollution. And so the way that we will be able to deal with those or have to think about dealing with those will have to change, because they'll be kind of seen as less likely to happen in the next 2 years, but thinking about the longer term, more likely to happen in sooner rather than later. So in terms of business, we can look at these risks that the World Economic Forum and many people are saying are closer than we think. So the physical risks that we see, the business risk is physical, the business risk that we see will become physical. So the physical risk is damage to companies and assets in the companies, maybe from flooding, from hurricanes and typhoons. Those are the very immediate things. Maybe there are value chain risks, so physical disruptions, as I mentioned before, due to various weather patterns, or perhaps water levels changing, or extreme weather. Litigation risks, we see perhaps climate-related lawsuits as well. So what we're seeing is that actually those kind of organizations that are making claims against how they perform or don't perform in their business dealings are actually at risk of being called out and charged with greenwashing or kind of litigation. Some of the other risks are reputational risks. So consumers and other kind of stakeholders will start to see that your organizations aren't necessarily doing enough to create positive impacts, or also are responsible for creating many of the negative impacts that we see. So maybe more pollution, maybe irresponsibly disposed of packaging, maybe your kind of effluents and pollution from your production methods aren't being taken care of properly. So your reputational risks, which will then also affect how consumers buy your products or see your business. asset value risks. If you have assets, factories, or offices in certain areas, perhaps they are prone to flooding, or they're in areas of important economic areas where there may be places that other people cannot reach. You kind of think about those risks, market value risks, stock prices, human capital risks, maybe your employees leave, transition risks. So as regulation changes moving towards a more low carbon economy, maybe your business isn't prepared for that, and you face, maybe your machinery becomes obsolete, or you're producing too much carbon, and maybe kind of cross-border transaction costs. So all these things, and access to capital, meaning that you may not have access to capital because banks and lenders will not lend you money because they see your business risk. So these are all the real business risks we have from not moving closer or not making a move on reporting as well. So back to this risk and opportunity, the carrot and the stick. And depending on how you see the world will depend on whether or not you start your reporting because you have to, or it's been mandated by a government or industry regulator, or whether or not you start it and see it as an important part of your journey towards being able to create value and improve upon your own performance when it comes to sustainability and ESG. So there are some broader trends that are happening as well alongside all these elements of kind of geopolitical tension and regulation as well. And there are trends that are happening around the world, I would say, stronger in some places than others. So many people are making commitments to net zero. So those who are not making those commitments or are not part of this idea and this goal may see themselves kind of being pushed out of supply chains or be dropped as suppliers because ultimately many of the larger institutions and organizations are reporting against further into their supply chain as well. There's more stakeholder pressure and activism. So people are seeing through social media, through the transparency now afforded by the internet and global news, that certain organizations should be taking a stance on certain issues. And so this is getting louder and louder and more prevalent. We see that, people boycott certain companies and industries if they fail to take action where it's needed. Some other things are things like there's a move towards more diversity on boards and having a more holistic way of thinking, so that we cover more bases in our business strategy to include more ways of creating value and mitigating risks as well. And so people are looking at boards to make these decisions and put the right people in the place so that they can take the right action for the business to succeed. Reporting is becoming more and more important. And so it's no longer just you may choose to report, but as industry moves and as business moves, so does that need to report. And so what we're seeing is that, people will start to need to think about making their entire supply chain aligned to globally accepted standards, globally identified kind of ways of operating that ensure that we are not continually destroying the planet and making money at the same time without regard for the consequences there. And what we see is that an increasing kind of importance placed on nature-based solutions. So realizing that there is an implicit value to nature-based assets that help us to keep the planet healthy, that help us to live quality of life, that help us to continue to produce the products that we do and to live healthy, live as a healthy society. And so that's something that people are slowly realizing is something that we have to strike a fine balance between that health and kind of utilization of what the planet gives us on a longer term basis. So what I'm going to share with you today briefly, just to try and help it connect the bigger picture to the more kind of daily business operations, is a kind of the overarching global business case, maybe the company level case and points around why it's good for a company, and then a project level business case and why is it good for your kind of a project, or what kind of value can you create there. And so the opportunities that we should think about, rather than thinking about it as a cost, are fourfold. One is you're ahead of regulatory pressures and issues. So instead of being reactive to what the regulation says, you're more proactive, and you have already anticipated what might come and be ready for that, rather than being caught on the back foot. And this is something that, if you keep your eye on, like any business strategy, you'll think about what's next. You'll be a bit in front of the curve as opposed to behind. The other thing is the business benefits. So, you should think about what can you gain from just starting to act on sustainability and ESG now. So there may be cost savings, you're managing risk, and you're also attracting new talent. So many of the newer generation want more to think about in their work and for an organization that they work for, rather than simply a paycheck. Okay, so this is something that it can bring these sort of better business benefits for your organization as well. Stakeholder expectations. So those investors, the customers, employees, all of those people who are stakeholders in your ecosystem and your business circle, they will be having varying expectations of how you should be operating as a business. And so thinking about that at various levels means that you will then do something at each level for the different stakeholders to try and ensure that you're relevant to them, that you're understanding their needs and their requirements for being part of your business ecosystem. And there are market opportunities. So whilst many of us have historically looked at just growth in terms of size and markets, what we can start to think about is that you do have new clients and markets, but they may not be the kind of traditional ways that you've understood. So thinking about deeper relationships with your clients and your customers, better loyalty to you as an organization, or new ways of creating value for those customers and markets. And so instead of just creating more of something or growing bigger in size by producing and selling more, you might think of something different. So instead of sort of digging the same hole in the same type of hole to do something, you're thinking about digging a different hole where you'll find new opportunities for your business to thrive and do something novel. So we talked about those three levels. And so the global level, then there's a company level, then there's a project level. And so at a global level, we can say that it helps us to fulfill a greater purpose than just making money. And a lot of people are asking a question, what more is next? How do we create differentiation between our business and another business? And we don't just want to compete on price. And so at a higher level, people want to align to something greater than themselves, something that benefits humanity or something that benefits wider society. And so you have an enhanced reputation if you can demonstrate this. You'll capture new opportunities. So as I mentioned earlier, there's ways to create different businesses, different products and services that address different problems that your customers may have and be looking for solutions to. And then there are these new emerging risks that we saw in that list from the World Economic Forum, where we start to think about mitigating those risks as well. And we're not just kind of responding later on, but we're proactively finding ways to try and make a contribution and to secure our own business for the longer term. And so here, when we talk about the three levels, there's kind of business case for those three levels. So on the global level, you kind of look at the purpose and looking to support the achieving of the Sustainable Development Goals. So these goals that are outlined for greater humanity, you will be contributing to those as well. On a company level case, you kind of get to engage with various stakeholders and you kind of improving your governance and looking at the purpose of your organization and what more they bring to their business, to your business, through adopting kind of sustainability and ESG starting with reporting. And then we look at kind of helping to fulfill kind of more specific goals in your organization or strategies. Maybe you want to develop new products and services and business models and create new forms of value for the various stakeholders that are part of your business activities. You get to then kind of seize economic opportunities, and this allows you to think more creatively about what your business ideas are. You should, at a company level, see growth in your revenue if you've come up with novel ideas and novel businesses to kind of support that. You may save on your operating expenses, and this is always a good thing for businesses because of the rising costs of many of the inputs needed to run a business. And maybe you save on HR expenses. So instead of having to rehire new people all the time or train new people after others have left, what you see is that you start to get a more rounded team or a team of people who can work across many areas of the business because they're already familiar with your business. And then you see revenue growth, maybe because you've created these new services, and you have expense savings, maybe the asset value increases or your market value increases. So maybe you become more attractive in the market because of the new services and products that you're delivering. And on a level of kind of mitigating risk, you help to kind of contribute to mitigating the global risks in kind of climate change and global warming, pollution. That's your contribution as an organization. Maybe you then also stop your revenue from decreasing because you've started to attract new customers and because you've got new revenue streams. Your operation expenses increase if you don't do anything. You will still be subject to increased energy prices, increase in raw materials, and maybe you have to keep hiring new people because people do not agree with the way that you're operating a business. And then kind of project level business case, your expenses may increase through all these risks that we see coming, and the converse if you do nothing. So if you do it, then maybe you'll see higher GDP in society, in your country. You'll be contributing to that. If you see on a business level that you do take action, then you could be in for higher profits for your business, and you may get a higher return on investment from your activities in contributing to sustainability as well, or ESG. So getting started on this journey is really important. So there was some research done in 2022 by permissioned by Google, and what they found was that they surveyed just under 1,500 executives across 16 markets, and most of these executives were kind of C-suite level or VP level, and they came from various industries such as retail and consumer packaged goods, healthcare, life sciences, manufacturing, technology, media, many different industries. And what they found from this survey or this research was that actually many executives were at that point very interested to kind of invest in sustainability and make positive impact, be that kind of against climate change alongside their company growth. But they were concerned really for this authentic change, so the ability to do something authentic for their business and contribute authentically to sustainability and ESG. And they were worried about kind of greenwashing and what constitutes kind of improvement, and through kind of what could they measure and what were the kind of relevant goals. And so they found there was some concerns around this. There's there's a lack of investment in the right technology, so not knowing what was the right thing to invest in. Many people weren't sure of what sustainability and ESG was. So was there really a good understanding in the organization? Often they felt that this relentless focus on profit and growth was something that stopped them from making good progress on it as well. So a barrier there. And lack of budget. So maybe they thought it was quite expensive, or that there were high costs involved that maybe they wouldn't recoup through their activities or through doing this. And their lack of kind of regulatory incentives. And so at that point, they were concerned that there was just no push for that. So why would they engage in doing this? And these are just some of the barriers that exist, not just for these large organizations, but of course for SMEs as well. And I think with SMEs, what we find is that we have less kind of resource in our organizations in order to be able to contribute and make positive change and headway on sustainability and ESG. And so these are the similar concerns and barriers, I believe, for not just large organizations, but across the board as well. And so why do we want to talk about reporting? And I think this is the crux of what we're looking at today. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. A famous quote by the management guru Peter Drucker, and I, to a certain extent, I agree with it. I don't think measuring everything is important all the time, but I think in this case, getting started on the sustainability journey is definitely something that can really support this. So I like to kind of see sustainability reporting as a little bit of a health check for organizations. And Dongjin alluded to kind of voluntary versus mandatory reporting for SMEs. And so just to differentiate, mandatory is obviously something that's been mandated by your government or an industry or a partner, a business partner or supplier that you need to do. And voluntary is something that you may choose to do because it's got benefits that we'll talk about now. So this is something that you should consider if you're not been mandated, but you should start to think about voluntary reporting. And there are some reasons why. If you start with voluntary reporting, you probably get a bit more flexibility in your starting of doing this. Whereas if you go straight into mandatory reporting, it may become quite a challenging exercise for your organization if you're not ready. So it's better to start early rather than much later. So there are a few differences there. So it's the difference between kind of the flexibility for voluntary and standardization for mandatory. So the perception, so the stakeholder perception of voluntary reporting is good. People will think that your company is forward-looking and really willing to contribute to something greater than themselves, as well as make a positive contribution and demonstrate something beyond the bare minimum. Whereas if you just do it because you're meeting regulatory requirements, you may find that it's less favorably viewed. And then there's different ways of reporting whether or not you're doing mandatory or voluntary. So maybe you've been told that you have to report against a certain standard or framework, whereas if you start voluntarily, you can often choose for yourself what is best and what suits your company whilst you get these processes in place to do this. And this often can help you to iron out any processes that aren't there or any data management issues or kind of gathering of data that you may not have started yet. And so you have to be mindful of when you're doing voluntary versus mandatory, if you're kind of cherry picking certain factors and information to disclose. Whereas if you're doing mandatory reporting, you may find that you're forced to disclose everything and it may be more rigid. So you have to think about those benefits as well and some of the challenges around that. And just to say broadly, there's kind of a trend towards integrating these, starting with voluntary and then moving towards mandatory reporting. But what we'll see is that over time, we're hoping that information becomes more comparable and easier for people to report and understand as well. So just to briefly show you, these are just a combination of frameworks, standards, disclosures, and certifications. And I'll go into the next slide slightly or briefly some of the differences. So these things are different. Some of these are global, and some of these go across industries, and some of them are industry specific, some of them are geographically specific. And so depending on whether or not you are mandated to report or whether or not you choose to report, or whether or not you choose to get the certification or require a certification will depend on which one you choose. And this is something that will be dependent on each organization. And so here in this slide, we kind of outline some of the differences between them. So the difference between a reporting framework and a disclosure and a standard and certification can be quite significant. Now, just to say again, these are not mutually exclusive categorizations and nor are they kind of collectively exhaustive. There are broad ways to look at them slightly differently and understand which one you would use when. So frameworks provide a structure or guideline for how you should report. They're often quite broad and they provide guidance on what can be reported, and they often allow for some flexibility there. So if you haven't been told you have to report and you start, this is a nice way to go, because you can then pick some of the things that mean more to your business and your stakeholders as possible. And some examples are maybe GRI and SASB as well. There are some more in there. You can look at those slides. The disclosures refer to actual information about what companies share about their performance. They're often specific data points and metrics and narratives. They may be voluntary or mandatory and can often align with frameworks or standards, but can also be company specific. And some of the things that you look at may be greenhouse gas emissions data, diversity statistics, water usage. And so what you're trying to do there is to try and just give some information and data and disclose what you have and what your company performance is there. Standards may be more specific and prescriptive than a framework. So they may provide detailed requirements for measuring and managing and reporting sustainability information. They may focus on specific topics or industries and try to often aim to ensure consistency and comparability in reporting. So this is something that maybe an industry regulator may suggest you do or mandate you do, and something that then allows you to look across industries to compare and benchmark against. And certifications, third-party verifications that an organization meets specific sustainability criteria. So this is perhaps like a good way and a shorthand for people to get an idea quickly if your organization meets a criteria or a standard, and they can quickly choose your organization or know that you've adhered to certain performance indicators or metrics that allow them to quickly identify that. So it's often a third party who will endorse this or verify it, and it can apply to products, processes, or the whole organization. And so examples of this might be LEED certification for buildings, and fair trade for products. So these are just some examples of certifications. So there is a difference, and how you choose these will depend on what's asked by your regulator or your industry, or if you're doing it voluntarily, what you think is appropriate for your stakeholders and customers. So I've outlined some simple steps, and obviously sometimes it can be more complex than this and more simple than this. But these are some broad steps that you can take to get started as an SME. So as an overview, your motivation and goal, why would you be reporting? What is the purpose of you doing this? The industry context, why or what does your industry say about what's needed or not needed, or how you should be moving with them and other peers. The resource capacity is how much human capital do you have in your organization, how much money and time and data do you have that you can put into this to create something that's meaningful for your stakeholders and for you to improve upon. And then the material issues. So what are the key things that are important to you as a business, but also those in your wider stakeholder ecosystem? These are the people that are part of your business supply chain, who are part of your decision making, and who impact or are impacted by what you choose to report or not report and act. And stakeholder expectations. So what do those people who may not be directly involved in your business, but who are definitely part of the system itself, expect? And then how can you kind of start simple and scale up? Well, that's the key, is starting simply and then scaling up or improving on what you're doing. So when we talk about kind of your motivations and goals, what you should be doing is kind of clearly defining why you're doing this. And otherwise, it's the information you get and your reason for doing it will not be clear, and probably quite ineffective and meaningless. And these reasons could be kind of improving operational efficiency and reducing costs. It could be attracting, different types of customers who care about the environment and society, and that there in turn will help you increase your brand reputation. It could be preparing ahead of time for regulatory requirements, or it could be aligning with trends that are happening or coming in your industry. And so how you decide which framework or standards or certification or disclosures you would choose are dependent on a number of factors. And so this is something that's important for many of you to kind of outline for yourselves. Nobody can do this for you, especially if you're doing this voluntarily. And this is something as a process that you should do for yourself. So you should be thinking about kind of the context of your industry, step 2. And that's, looking at which ones are maybe most common and valued in your industry. And so some industries will have a sector-specific framework or standard that you need to report against, and others may not, and they'll leave it up to you to decide how to do this. So the factors that will influence your context will be regulation in your jurisdiction, in your country, in your geography, any industry-specific expectations and best practices, the target audience, who is going to be kind of understanding and reading your report and things like that, and the data that you provide, the size of your company and the resources you have. So some reporting frameworks and standards take more than others, and that's just normal. Okay, it just depending on that depends on the actual framework itself. Specific sustainability goals and focus areas. So some may focus more on environmental protection, and some may focus more on societal well-being. Hopefully they do both, but then it will depend on what you're looking to achieve. It will depend on if you want to compare with your peers or industry colleagues and companies. The need for third-party verification. So do you need this information and this report to be verified by somebody else? This also plays a huge part in deciding, what you choose. And interoperability with other standards and platforms. Because we're seeing this shift and this evolution, you might choose a framework that is already quite widely adopted, or something that is being integrated or can be compared or operate between different standards and frameworks as well. So evaluate your resource capacity. So you have to realistically think about what you're able to do within the resources that you have in your organization. If you only have one person who's doing it part-time, then you should choose something that can be done realistically within the time given to achieve what you need. If you have a team, or you can dedicate more people to it, and maybe you have consultants or external providers who can support you, then that's obviously, you can try and aim for something that's slightly more rigorous and data heavy and thorough. But that really depends on each organization, and how the technology and all the data gathering is done will impact that as well. So you think about the team you have, how long you have to report or to collect that data, and how long it will take you to kind of analyze that data and present it into something usable and meaningful. What kind of equipment and technology you need. Do you have all the sensors and the information available to you? Do you need to buy new equipment to do this? And then the actual data that you gather, like how do you gather that? Who looks after it? Who continuously monitors it? And where is it available from, and how accurate is it? And then the budget and financial constraints. If it costs a lot to do this exercise, and then you have to pay someone to verify this, and you don't have the budget, then you need to think about the efficacy and the kind of effectiveness of doing this exercise as well. So think carefully about these factors as well, because there's no point in reporting something that cannot be done within the bounds and time and scope of what you have as an organization. It's better to do something and start small than do nothing. So the next thing you should consider and do in this kind of process is focus on material issues. And so what you then do is you can't report on every single thing. It would just be impossible if you have a small team and limited resources to do this. And it just doesn't make sense. And so what people say is that you should do materiality assessment to really understand what are the key topics that are important to you as a business, and your ability to continue operating as a business, but also the people within your value chain and your network. And what does that mean to them as well, and how meaningful and how impacted are they? And so you do a materiality assessment. And this is something that has evolved as well. So this term materiality originated from the kind of what was financially material to a business, to being adopted in the sustainability space, to think about what is material in terms of sustainability and stakeholders. So we have three types of materiality. One is materiality in terms of what is the impact the world has on your business. Double materiality, which is what is the impact that the world has on your business and the impact your business has on the world. So it goes both ways, as you can see in this diagram. And then triple materiality, which goes all ways, including kind of society and the context in which you're operating as well. So this is something that we shouldn't shy away from, but maybe takes some while to be able to think about all these different dimensions of materiality as well. And the New York Stern defines materiality as a material sustainability issue is an economic, environmental, or social issue on which a company has an impact or may be impacted by. It may also be one that significantly influences the assets and decisions of stakeholders. So by assessing some of these first, you then think about what you're reporting on as well. There's no point in reporting on something that makes insignificant difference to your business. And what we're seeing is that actually everything influences everything, but you have to choose certain topics and be sure that you're reporting meaningfully within the context of your environment or your business ecosystem. And so you also should be considering the expectations of your stakeholders. Your stakeholders, they're your customers, your employees, and your investors, if you have any. And so what you can do in terms of when you're reporting voluntarily is aligning some of these, aligning the reporting that you're doing with kind of widely recognized standards or frameworks or certifications, disclosures. And these kind of will help you to kind of make an assessment as to whether or not this is something that is important to them. And does this help them to understand your business and the material topics of your business as well? And so a lot of these things that your stakeholders will be looking for are listed here. So they're looking for your business to be kind of transparent and accountable. Are you managing risk well enough? Are you kind of really looking at your competitive edge? Are you seeing how you can be more competitive in the face of some of these global challenges that we're facing and a business context? Does this influence the kind of investment decision making? Yes, probably for some of your key investing stakeholders. Yes, it probably does. Or maybe, you know, they're looking at your environmental impact if your stakeholders are specifically focused on environmental issues. And so if you think about the many factors that your stakeholders will be thinking about, you can start to understand what they may be looking for if you start reporting and what you're reporting against. And maybe they want you to kind of look deeper into your supply chain to know that there's no child labor or that you're not kind of breaking any modern slavery laws. So these are all different things that if you're engaging your stakeholders, then you will start to understand how these expectations can be managed and how you can get them on board with the efforts that you're kind of going through. And finally, the advice is those companies who are new to sustainability reporting is kind of to like start small and get with, you know, a simpler framework, something that's more manageable for your organization when you first start, and then slowly but surely grow how you do this and scale how you do this and be more thorough and vigorous in how you do this. So maybe you start with one part of your sustainability or your ESG, maybe environmental, and whilst you shouldn't be just reporting on one of these, you could start by focusing there first and then making a plan to integrate more indicators and more factors and more metrics into your reporting. Maybe there's a sector-specific certification that many already report on or kind of pursue in your industry, or maybe there's a few metrics that are more suitable for the type of business that you have. If you're in manufacturing or if you're in a services businesses, it will really depend on your own context there. That's an overview of how to get started, and I believe that it kind of gives you a good way to think about the steps needed. There's obviously a lot more detail in this, but it takes quite a lot of explanation. It's quite a topic that you can really dive deep into. I just want to kind of show you that in your terms of your sustainability journey, this is something that you'd want to think about. And we try and frame this for organizations so they see what the journey might look like. And this is not necessarily a linear journey, but how you progressively become more and more ambitious in your sustainability performance and your ESG reporting and kind of strategic imperative. So on one side, on the kind of left-hand side, you see kind of business as usual, which is more extractive. And we take those resources from the earth, we make products, and then we kind of dispose of them, and kind of nothing is replaced. And that's kind of what we would call business as usual. Then we see, as we move towards more and more organizations being mandated or voluntarily reporting, maybe it's compliance, we see that that's kind of something that they can start by themselves. But it's kind of, you'd start with low-hanging fruit. You might start with water, waste, and energy, looking at those inputs and outputs of your business. And as you move kind of further along, you see that once you start understanding your baseline and reporting, you start to, if you do this on a regular basis, maybe an annual basis, you start to look for ways to improve some of these performance metrics, some of these water, waste, and energy that you might be kind of stable with. You may start to improve those over time and look for ways to get better efficiencies. You may be kind of looking at creating more positive impact through CSR initiatives, and you might be looking at kind of optimizing the resources that you already have. And then what we see is, as people get more and more into this journey, they then start looking at ways to really create value from what they're doing and go beyond compliance, go beyond reporting, but instead go towards a more strategic direction in terms of what they do in their sustainability performance. And so maybe they look at creating new products and services that actually actively increase the amount of something positive, be that social capital, be that natural capital. And so overall, their entire business starts to align with a much more positive and I guess collectively positive and aligned business strategy. And so that looks like different things. So at that first level of compliance and regulation, you're just kind of meeting the basics. And maybe you're looking to secure or maintain supplier relationships and avoid fines. As you move up, you're kind of reducing waste. Maybe you're looking at renewable energy. Maybe you find locally sourced materials. Maybe you're improving your efficiency and conserving water. So you're making positive changes in your business that really benefit the planet and society as well. And then you start to see that maybe you're aligning these efforts with customer expectations as well. So people are starting to ask for more from you as an organization. You're starting to deliver on those promises of more than just being a business and a product or service provider. You start to develop maybe a comprehensive roadmap of how you will improve your sustainability. And maybe you're incorporating it into your brand, so it becomes part of the narrative and actually the decision-making that guides your business strategy in the longer term. And then you kind of look at maybe something a bit more of a social license to operate, where you're looking at comprehensive sustainability business practices. You're thinking about future generations beyond the generation now and the planetary impacts it will feel. And maybe you're kind of leading industry-wide initiatives. So you're not just doing it for yourself, but maybe you're actually bringing the whole industry. You're creating something in the ecosystem of your industry that can help create positive impact as a whole. And maybe even looking at innovating new technologies, maybe that address some of these complex challenges. So you may be changing processes across an ecosystem, or your entire business model aligns to something greater by putting back into society and into the environment. And so through that, what we hope is that businesses move from shareholder value to system value. And so what that means is, in business as usual now, what we see is this shareholder value, where financial returns are prioritized and companies privatize their gains and externalize losses. So all profits are kind of for those within the shareholder realm, and whatever happens outside, pollution, ocean acidification, depleted stocks, that happens to everybody, but the gains are kept, the positive financial gains are kept for the shareholders. And the economy, environment, and society are separate. And then we kind of see that people move to we hope that they move to shared value creation. So that's business comes first. Negative impacts are not sufficiently internalized, or they're justified by doing good elsewhere. So still business is prioritized. There are still some negative impacts, but they're shared inside and outside of the business. But also what we do is we kind of do good elsewhere. We continue doing business in the same way, but we then look at kind of making up for it by doing some CSR initiatives. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with CSR initiatives, but what we're trying to say is that what we need to do is try and align our business activities and objectives with doing good at the same time. They cannot be they shouldn't be separate where possible. And then what we try to do is think about creating systems value or systemic value. And here is, we see that, as I described, the economy, society, environment are all connected. And so here, creating that systems value is where businesses address societal and environmental needs in a holistic way, whilst not hindering progress towards a flourishing future. So that means that we continue to be able to do what we're doing, but we're not kind of just ignoring that fact, but we're creating greater value across the entire system. And so we're kind of net positive rather than net negative. And our kind of aim is to move people towards this way of operating businesses through starting their reporting journey, even if it starts as a voluntary effort. So just to compare this idea of sustainability reporting, why it's important to get started, you could see it as like a kind of a health check for your organization. So the reporting serves more as a sort of diagnostic assessment, and you get to check the vital signs of your business. What makes a good business overall? And it's not just one or two key indicators of profit or kind of products sold, right? It's actually the health of your business. Is it contributing to your customers' success? Is it contributing to your employee well-being? Is it ensuring a clean and healthy environment outside of the space, within the space it operates in? You're starting to identify risks. So if you have a health check, you'll know whether or not you're at risk of certain issues occurring in the near or long-term future. You're able to kind of then implement some preventative care. So you're able to think about, well, how can I mitigate these risks or start to slow these things down or even shift those to something else? You may be benchmarking against others in your industry. So starting reporting, you're starting to see how you're comparing to those other organizations in your industry and where your organization sits in the greater pool and greater scheme of things. You can then come up with a treatment plan. So once you have this assessment or this report, or you've outlined some of these key things, you can then start thinking about, well, how can I make an improvement? And this is where we see the real opportunity in innovation and kind of business transformation for organizations, large and small. It can help SMEs as well as large organizations. And then by starting this, you're then doing a regular health check. You're regularly assessing your business for multiple factors: your energy use, your carbon emissions, the waste that you're generating. You can then see and improve upon these on a regular basis and start to make savings and generate benefits across your business. And it then starts to help you have a holistic approach to managing your business overall. It gives you a much greater visibility of how your business is doing. So I want to go into just a few examples very briefly. I won't go into a lot, just to show you what some sustainability reports or kind of versions of reports look like. And just to say, these are not our clients, but I think they're interesting kind of examples to show you what sustainability reports could look like, because they look very different depending on the kind of organization. And if you're doing it voluntarily, you have a choice now to try and make something that suits your context and business. So this is for an example from Singapore. It's for Northwest Community Development Council here in Singapore. And this is a CDC, is a Community Development Council, which is established to aid in the local administration of kind of government policies and schemes. And so it functions as a kind of a bridge between the residents and the government, and it helps to strengthen kind of Singapore's social safety net. And so this CDC report actually was voluntary, and it's quite a small report. As you can see, it's visual, it's very colorful. They're reporting on some really interesting things that are meaningful to the community in which they operate. And so they've got things like the number of students who have benefited from their programs. They talk about their key pillars. There's a note from the mayor. I think they just come out of COVID here. And so you see, this is a really nice example of a visual report, quite simple. It has clear graphics, very numerical, with some interesting stories from stakeholders and quotes. And it's really a nice way to think about presenting information that is easy to digest, gives people an overview of your organization and what you're doing, but also to see at a glance what are the things that mean something to your organization and your community. And I like this example because I think it's accessible to people broadly. You don't need to sit and read for many hours, and you don't have to gather lots of complex data. Some of this information seems like it could be very easily gathered by your organization and your teams. And so this is something that I think is a nice start for organizations who maybe have never done this before, and they don't have to report against something specific yet. And you can see that it's colorful and there's data, and it also aligns to the SDGs. So they've also outlined how their impacts are, or their kind of activities and what they report against contribute to the SDGs as well. And so this is a very humanized report, and it shows people within the community as well. So this is something that I think is an accessible way for many organizations to start. The second one is from a large private firm. It's global. It's called V Group, and it's a leading global marine support service provider. Now, they're headquartered in London, in England, and they have operations in over 60 countries and have offices in 60 countries. Sorry, they have operations in 30 countries and offices in 60 countries. And so this company was formed in 1984. And so whilst they are large and global, they've been reporting since around 2019. At least that's what shows on their publicly available data, or website rather. And so what you see is that they're reporting using SASB standards and part of also alongside the TCFD. So they have for many years produced kind of more and more advanced reports. And so you can see that, I mean, at one stage it was 8 pages, at another stage it's 27 pages, another stage it's 40 pages. But you can see there's like quite a detailed report that aligns to SDGs. They have key data there as well. They have some key metrics because they're an organization that probably emits a lot of carbon and impacts marine ecosystems. That's what they're reporting against as well. And maybe this is something that within what they think is material to their business, they've included in their report as well against this standard. And so as they've got more and more advanced in their reporting, obviously the amount of data and information that they present increases as the complexity of their supply chain, their operations probably also does. But what they've also done, which I think is nice, is they've created dashboard on their website. So this dashboard is like a 2 or 3 page overview of some of the key information that changes a bit more frequently. So whilst they have a very detailed report, as you can see, there's qualitative information there, there's quantitative information. They've also presented some nice human stories. The dashboard that they have is updated about twice a year. And so that dashboard, which I'll show you on the next page, highlights some of those key informations which make it accessible for their stakeholders who may be looking for this information and don't want to read a 20 or 30 page report. So here they've got some nice visuals, and the content is determined by the framework or standard that they're reporting against. And so as a large organization, it's still fairly reasonable, I think. And here's an example of their dashboard that they show. So it shows some of the updates and metrics around things that are changing over shorter periods of time. So it's not just annually reported. They report more in the interim in other areas as well. So I think this is a useful way to give people information quickly without overwhelming them and being overwhelmed by doing the full reporting exercise. The last report is by Lien Huat Timbers, which is a company in Singapore. Now, they were incorporated in the late 1970s and they later become publicly listed. But they started off as a very kind of run-of-the-mill company. They're primarily in manufacturing and trading of wooden pallets and timber-related products. And so their product line was predominantly in things that required raw materials, such as wooden pallets, boxes, crates, and flooring, as well as furniture components. And so they are an eco-friendly manufacturer, but this was something that they had seen very early on as a strategic and competitive advantage. And so they invested early on into transforming their business into one that prioritizes sustainability and eco-friendly kind of performance and activities. And so they established a plant in Singapore to manufacture or to recycle waste wood from their plant because it was costly to dispose of this material. And so by doing this, they then obviously created a really robust and desirable business that is now very much ahead of its peers in terms of what it was doing back then. And it's considered a very reputable kind of organization because they've also been reporting for a number of years. So they have about 88 employees and they actually have been reporting for quite a number of years already. So their reports also have changed over the years, but you see them report against GRI in this instance. And so it outlines, you can see the content there from there, quite a lot of their business activities, what the materials they use are, what their material topics are, some information on their economic performance, the impact of climate change in Singapore. So they've connected the bigger picture to their own context. They talk about their production processes, so they're transparent about that. And they also show what their business model is and how it kind of works as a whole. So that transparency and visibility gives people confidence in the organization itself. And so you can see these reports all highlight a number of different things. And so choosing how to report initially will be, if you're doing it voluntarily, will be something you should consider and use as an opportunity to really reach out and talk to those people in your supply chain and in your ecosystem and your important stakeholders as well. I want to kind of say that what makes a good report depends, and it always does. So I think here's some kind of tips on what maybe constitutes a good report for organizations. So one is kind of having clear objectives. So being sure you're like defining why you're doing this and what you hope to achieve. The material focus. So this identifies and prioritizes the most significant impacts and issues relevant to your organization and stakeholders themselves. No point in reporting on something that means nothing to those in your business or beyond. If you can gather comprehensive data, you shouldn't be put off by this. Just start and try your best to start gathering some data. But a good report would have kind of accurate and relevant data as both positive and negative. And I can't stress this enough. You shouldn't just be highlighting what's good in your organization, what you do well. You should be honest about where you could improve and what's not so good and how that can be eventually something that you work towards. Being transparent. So where are the setbacks, where are the challenges? That's really important. Otherwise, people know that you're greenwashing. And that's something that many people will face backlash against. As long as there's a strategic alignment. So this demonstrates how these initiatives actually support your business strategy, not we're just doing these things because we think they're the best things to do, although that's a very noble effort. You should be also showing that they can help your business grow or develop or progress in some way. Measurable targets, so setting things that are realistically achievable, setting things that are specific and time-bound, and so you can slowly but surely make progress. Show how stakeholder engagement is showing how you've involved the important people in your ecosystem and stakeholder relations, how you've responded and identified what's important to them and how you've aligned to some of their goals as well. Present balanced reporting. So this is again kind of the same point of kind of transparency as well, is actually ensuring that you're not just showing the good things, but you're also showing the points for improvement. Clear metrics and KPIs. So whilst you should be probably reporting, some things that are important to the business, you should also use consistent things that may be important to your industry or important broadly at the level that makes a significant impact to, say, emissions or water conservation. So some standard things that can also help others to understand those basic things you're tracking. And future outlook. So you should also think about, what do you plan to do in the future? What, not just where are you today, but here are some problems or here's some opportunities, and this is how we hope to improve upon them or address them in the near future. So these are just some things that might make a good report for you as well. And just to say that this may not be a really easy exercise. You may face some challenges. Obviously, you're getting started. It's like digitalization. You start with some teething problems, with not understanding it, with uncertainty. And here are some of the things that you may face. And just to say that it will be good and it will improve, and it might not improve. It might get worse before it gets better. And I think these are some of the things that you should be kind of just aware of. So you may face uncertainty in your organization if you've never done it. Who should take ownership of this? Whose job is this? It should be everybody's job. But so who's going to lead this charge? You may face trouble kind of establishing which boundaries, like what do you include and what do you not include. And for SMEs, it may be easy or it may be simple because you may be part of a much bigger supply chain as well. Sometimes you may be concerned over the time-consuming nature of this. Yes, it is time-consuming. I think the sooner you start, the better. That will allow you to become more prepared, and it won't all come at once, and it won't be so overwhelming. Lack of proper understanding and coordination between the different departments. So this is obviously aligning your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders to ensure that people understand why, how, who, why you're doing this. Lack of availability in data and ensuring accuracy and consistency. So again, it will take practice, it will take time, and it will take a critical eye to understand what you need. But there are many resources out there to help you do this. And so there are many consultants to do this, and there are many platforms that help you do this as well. So if you don't have data, you can estimate, or you can use proxies, but also you can just start to try and reach into your supply chain to get this data, or your customers and suppliers. The complexity in interpreting and applying multiple standards and frameworks. This is inevitable. I think there's move towards harmonization and interoperability, but this is something that many people are still facing and probably will continue to face in the next 3 to 5 years until we have a better sense of it globally and as people start to move more in line with each other. Struggle to obtain comprehensive visibility over the supply chain. This is due diligence that you should be doing anyway. So finding this information will be something you would probably need to do whether or not you had to report. But it just means that you should be more aware, and you're more aware of the risks that you could be facing in your own supply chain and disruptions there as well. Setting appropriate key performance indicators for sustainability goals. This is something that many people struggle with, and is something that some frameworks and industry bodies are helping with, but this is something that can only be done through consultation and some kind of logic building with your own team, as well as those outside who need to know this information. This is still ongoing for many people. Difficult in accurately calculating emission factors for various activities and processes. We do not have enough data yet for everybody to be able to do this. And so as we get more and more kind of familiar with data and able to gather more data, this should improve. Sometimes people have to estimate, and sometimes people have to use databases to do this, and sometimes people have to kind of use industry standards. But there are ways to calculate some of it. You should get consultants and platforms to help you. And concerns of how to effectively present a report to meet stakeholders' needs. This is something which many people will have to do, sometimes in different formats, and they'll have to adapt information and data accordingly. But if you start with having some information and data, then you can surely adapt it based on the people that need to read it or hear it or know it. And so this is something that can be changed, even if you have the raw data and information, can be presented differently depending on the need. And so here are some reasons why you should get started on this. If you haven't already taken away from this mammoth session on reporting why you could be doing this, it helps with a greater purpose. You know, it's your social license to operate, and you're contributing to something greater than just one small business or your own organization, but something for the collective. Your reputation can and should become more positive, and therefore your customers and stakeholders become more loyal and have an affinity towards your business, and that should in turn, increase or improve your revenue growth. You hopefully should be able to get some savings, so you'll be able to through your energy, waste, materials, insurance, benefit from some of these savings through improving your performance on these metrics. In terms of your own team, they would be proud and energized, and as employees, they'll be engaged in doing the work for your organization and proud to be part of your team. And you may see kind of higher productivity, you may have better options for hiring and retention, and also fewer people leaving. You may get new sources of funding and easier access to capital because you have managed your risks and you have found other ways to generate new revenue streams for your business. You may have kind of increased brand and market value because people perceive your organization positively. And perhaps, and this is what we hope for, is that you will develop new products and services and business models that address the new needs that we will see in the future. We are seeing now and will see in the future. And so therefore contributing to kind of innovation within your business and your organization. And you then, obviously, by doing this and starting with your reporting and working towards the innovation and changing your business, you avoid those risks of inaction, which is the kind of none of the above that you will get if you do nothing. So I think that's about it for today. I hope it's been insightful, and I'd like to kind of stop there.
All right, thank you so much for sharing informative slide and insight on ESGs and sustainability for SMEs. All right, so following your presentation, I'd like to ask a few questions to clarify or emphasize the information shared. And I appreciate it if you could provide answers to these questions very briefly.
Sure.
Right, my first question is kind of prioritizing the right ESG criteria. This can be depending on the industry, region, or business model. For instance, a manufacturing SME may prioritize reducing emissions and waste, while a service-based SME might focus on diversity and inclusion. So when starting out with ESG, SME need to focus on what's most relevant to their specific context. So, but how do they can determine which criteria are most important?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Dongjin. I think it depends, as always. I think engaging their stakeholders is really important to understand what's important to them and what's material to them. But I think depending on the context of the business, that will be where their biggest impact is. And so it will, obviously, if you are a manufacturing company, then many of the things that you report on will be to do with your manufacturing operations. And there are those elements of water, waste, energy, materials, those will be more important. If you're a service-based industry, it may be the impact that you have on broader society, or it may be, your employee engagement, or it may be the reputational risks of your organization. So it just depends on these already. That it would depend. You have to do that kind of assessment and stakeholder engagement.
All right, thank you for the answer. And my second question is kind of like, I believe that the voluntary sustainability reporting can be a powerful tool to attract investors, customers, and other stakeholders. By being transparent about sustainability effort, the SMEs can build trust and credibility. And I could see that example where the SMEs gain significant competitive advantages simply by sharing their ESG journey. So what practical step the SME can take to ensure the reporting resonate with these stakeholders?
That's a nice question. I think, again, talking to your stakeholders, engaging them is one aspect of it. I think what we're finding is that many organizations are already reporting, and they're already aligning to certain goals or objectives or frameworks. And so finding out what's important to them, perhaps in their own reporting, will then influence what's important in your reporting, right? What means something to them means something to you, because you're not separate from them as an organization. You're part of their ecosystem or their supply chain as well. So I think it's aligning and reading their reports and what they care about, and understanding how it impacts their business and how then in turn impacts your business.
Thank you for the answers. Okay, so my third question is like, the regulatory landscape around ESG reporting is quite changing so fast. So even if SMEs are not required to report today, then how can the SMEs can prepare for the future mandatory reporting requirement?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. Nobody knows fully where that will be going. It kind of evolves, and people are trying to align global standards, and everyone has local standards or local regulation, as well as being part of a global supply chain, perhaps. And so I think obviously it's keeping abreast of what's happening locally and globally on a regulation front, but I also think it's starting voluntarily now, so that you're more prepared, or you already have some sense of your baseline or some key information already. Because then when the actual, if there are sudden mandatory reporting requirements that come through, then you won't be completely without any data or information. You'll already have started to put the processes into your organization. You will already have started to gather some of that data from your own suppliers and supply chain and your own organization. So you're not just starting from zero when the mandatory requirements come through, but you've already started the process before that point.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And my another question is, when it comes to this sustainability, and how do we measure the progress beyond just looking at the financials, where such as key performance indicators are crucial, very crucial here. So this could include metrics like carbon emissions, water usage, waste reduction, or even employee diversity. So my question is, how can SMEs set realistic, achievable sustainability goal or track their progress over the time?
Okay. I think it's like a health check, right? You're saying it's not just financial metrics. Actually, in terms of any business, you want to know, how is your business doing across a number of different factors, or a number of different performance indicators. And so for those who are already measuring, financial information, and then you start with the basic low-hanging fruit, your water waste and emissions, those types of things, and energy rather. Those are things that are important at the start. But then as you become more and more kind of health conscious, or conscious of your sustainability performance, shall we say, you can then start thinking about what else makes a good business? What else makes a healthy business? Are your customers, happy with your products and services? Are your employees engaged in the work that they're doing? So you're not just measuring financial data. You're not just measuring environmental data. You're also measuring social data, like you said, DEI, other things that are also equally important for a healthy business as well, for the longevity of your business over time, and go slowly, kind of progressively improve as well.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that answer. Okay. Now my last question is sustainable supply chains are very critical, especially as stakeholders increasingly expect transparency throughout the entire value chain. So certificate like a LEED, Fair Trade, or ISO can help validate their effort. But how can SMEs encourage their supply chain partners to align with their sustainability goals?
Yeah, I think with things like certifications, I think they are like a shorthand, right? So they help people to quickly identify without going through too much of a long process. Okay, this person understands that I care about, say, a specific an industry specific concern. And I think through those conversations or through demonstrating maybe through a certification that you can then show that you care about this. And in terms of encouraging kind of your supply chain partners, I think that's something that you have to go through a process with as well. It's kind of engaging with your other partners to see, what do they care about and how would a certification or reporting or anything help them to achieve what they want to with their goals. And I think that's something that cannot be guessed necessarily. You actually start to talk to people in your supply chain, and then you start to realize that you have some shared concerns and shared goals that maybe are industry specific, right? Or that you can then bring together more than one or two players within the supply chain and actually make a difference at an industry level as well. So I think having those conversations as well as using things like that can really help.
Okay, thank you so much for providing answers to my questions. I believe that the viewers have more questions than me. So the viewer, you can see that later, view the questions from the chat box. So as we come to the close of today's APO productivity talk, I want to extend my very heartfelt thanks to Ms. Marisa for sharing her insight on the topic of getting started on ESG and sustainability for SMEs. So we will share additional questions from the audience with you later, and we will kindly ask you to provide answers for them. So thank you, Ms. Marisa, for your insight sharing, and we will invite you once again for the next series of PIT Talk.
Thank you so much. Thank
So
you.
viewers, thank you so much. So viewers are encouraged to leave the questions or comment in the chat box. So as we learn, sustainability isn't just about doing good for the planet. It's about seizing opportunities to improve productivity, cut costs, and future-proof our businesses. By integrating ESG practices, we not only reduce risk, but also open doors to innovation, operational efficiency, and enhanced brand reputation. For SMEs, the journey toward sustainability might seem daunting, but starting small, focusing on key priorities, and building gradually can lead to significant long-term benefits. Productivity and sustainability are deeply interconnected, and by adopting more sustainable practices, we can create value not just for our businesses, but for our communities and the environment. So let's continue to embrace this journey of aligning productivity with the purpose and work together toward a more sustainable and resilient and prosperous future. So we will bring you different topics can enhance our productivity of individuals, organizations, and economies as a whole. Thank you for watching the APO Talk. Thank you, Ms. Marisa.
Thank you.